Hello, team.
Andrea, it's going to be your ball game, so we'll just Ainsley and I'll participate and support.
Sure. Should we get started?
And whatever you want to do is fine.
Okay. Do you want to share the agenda, Ainsley?
Yes, let me pull that up.
Okay. Oh, wow. So we haven't met since the end of May.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so I approve both sets of minutes. Anyone else want to second those? I don't know if anyone has a chance to look at them.
I'll second. I looked at them. They all look good.
Okay, I see a few more people popping in.
I second that. I seen them.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The preliminary report was submitted, Ainsley and Steve.
Yes, it was submitted.
Okay. Great. Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I don't know if we wanted to jump to that yet or not.
Should we talk about what we talked about in our meeting with just like the 4 or 5 of us, where we talked about how we're going to prioritize the different areas? Steve and Ainsley, you kind of came up with that plan and idea. So I don't know if you want to share those next steps, and then I can share the draft of what we submitted, and because I started doing the priority areas, and I can share that at some point a little bit later. But if you want to talk about the next steps to all this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do so. So we have our final report that's coming up in November. So our interim report, we listed a bunch of issues that we were identified, and now it's time to, sit down, hunker down, and work on those issues, do some research, and come up with some recommendations for improvement. So the next couple months are going to be kind of the research work months. Yeah, Christian, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I had a question. You said final report. You said it's due in November. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. In my head, I thought we had more time, like years. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a final is kind of a word we shouldn't use anymore. It's annual.
Okay. All right. That's why. Okay. That makes me feel better, because I was like, final.
Yeah, because it was the original law had us making a final report this year, and December 31st or January 1st, whatever it was. And then a subsequent piece of legislation extended us till 2029. So we had a discussion with the delegate, and clarified all this, and we'll make 2 reports a year, interim, annual. At some point, there'll be a final, because they won't keep renewing us past 29, I don't think. But does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, that's a really good question. So for June, we're really sitting down and prioritizing, Dr. Kinsora said, is prioritizing those issues that we raised, figuring out what issues we really want to sit down and focus on, since we can't focus on every issue, and then creating that kind of what activities do we need to do, what research do we need to do, what best practices we need to look into in order to come up with those recommendations. July and August are kind of, doing that research, receiving that information. September is drafting a write-up of those recommendations. October, submitting those issues or those recommendations to the commission for feedback. finalizing those write-ups, and November, the full commission is going to vote on the annual report. And then we also came up with a format for the annual report recommendation. So, a 1 to 2 sentence recommendation for policy, some background on the issue, the description of the issue, best practices, if applicable, description of the recommendation, and success metrics. So this is the work plan that we're going to be going off of to guide our work for the next couple of months towards that annual report. And I will put a link to this work plan in the chat.
And also, just to finish, in the interim report under higher education, the issues we identified had to do with funding, technology, space, incentives, reentry support, and statewide coordination. Those were I guess there's 6 or 7 of them. 6 of them. So that's what we've done so far in the interim report. And I hope you all have gotten a copy of the interim report, which it was sent out. If you haven't, we can do that again. So it's gone to the governor by this point.
Dr. Starr, I was actually just about to put that in the chat. Would it be okay if y'all send a link to the interim report again? I did see the draft, but I don't have on hand the final interim.
The final was almost identical. What they did is reformat it, but yes, we can give you the one we sent, no problem.
Thanks.
I'll put
Yeah,
a
maybe
link in the
send
chat
it
as
to
well.
everybody, or there's a link. Is that report also on the governor's website?
So it's still going through the approval process. So it passed our office, and now it's going to the governor's communications team to look over and approve it. So it's on its last leg before it actually gets sent out. But it should be sent out, I'm hoping, in the next week or so.
And then it will appear on the website? Or...
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
But there's no reason we can't share it right now. It's, everybody, we shared it all the way along, and if it's not likely to come back changed. So.
Okay. So I don't know if anyone has questions, but I'd love to move into the report that we submitted and talk about how we can maybe prioritize. I think there's 5 or 6 different issues. I already started to prioritize things just based on our conversations and what I kind of think how we should order things, but I would love feedback on what you all think of some of my ideas as well. So I don't know if Ainsley, I can share my screen. I could try. I can share. Okay.
I think you're able to, yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to close things out for a minute so I can figure out how to share. Okay, so I'm just gonna scroll to the top. Oh, I wish I had 2 monitors here.
Mhm.
You can see this? Yes, okay, I can see it. So, okay.
Yes.
So the first thing we put in our report was an area of funding, and personally think this should be priority number 1. And I wrote some notes about maybe some next steps. I don't know. Why don't I just go through how I prioritize things, and then I can go back to my notes, and then I'd love to hear if I'm wrong or if anyone thinks other things should be number 1. But I have funding as priority 1, then statewide coordination as priority 2, and I don't know. That could possibly be the number 1 priority before funding. I'm not sure. I have space as number 3, technology as number 4, incentives as number 5, And then I didn't rank reentry support because, and I wrote a little note, so we can go backwards. So I didn't rank this one because I know that there's a task force working on reentry. Donna Cobb is one of the people working on that report right now. And I kind of want to see what they're recommending, what's going to be in their report before we even include this. So I'm not really sure where to put it in terms of priority. So something that I had planned to do was to reach out to her and ask, like, what are some of the things that are going into their report? Because I don't think we should really duplicate efforts in terms of, what we're recommending as improvements. That's one thought.
Dr. Kator, I can speak to that.
Perfect.
I'm also on that one.
Okay.
And I'm Donna's vice chair on the report committee.
Nice.
I can let you know we're still pretty early in our planning.
Okay.
So I don't think there have been, to my knowledge, and they might know more, but as far as my awareness, we haven't identified any specific policies or anything that the task force is recommending yet.
Okay. Can I task you with being the person that just keeps us like informed? If then I don't need to talk with Donna.
Yeah, you can talk. Yeah, I can keep you in the loop with that.
That'd be awesome.
And I'll try to remember, but if you don't hear anything, feel free to ping me and I'll say, hey, we have an update, but as of now, I don't think we have any updates as far as specifics yet.
Okay. And what we put in this report might be actually completely different from what is being discussed on your committee. So I don't know. But as we get closer to like finalizing this, it would just be good to know and make sure we're not duplicating things. Steve, you have your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, just Christian, would you kindly, like you said, you don't have anything yet, but anything you can share as you go along, share with Ainsley and I and Andrea, for that matter, the higher ed subcommittee here. So because reentry is going to come up in the other areas too. ABE, GED, career tech, and it's just, I think it's so important that the state really do something in this area.
Yeah, I definitely can and will. I did want to say though, I think while we should be mindful of what they're proposing, I do think maybe we should give a shout out or a tie, right, if it's a good idea, and both task forces should be kind of speaking on one voice with, we both love this, education / reentry idea. So
Okay.
Right, absolutely. So we might write something like see the task force on reentry's report on, for more on this topic. Okay. So I'm going to go back up to the beginning where I prioritize funding as the main priority here. And we've had these conversations. So I feel like in the next 2 months, we should be doing this work in terms of doing some research on what the operational costs are of running a HEP program and how do the current programs that operate cover these costs? Because there's been conversations about what is the cost. There's been conversations about how do Pell Grants even work. So I think we should write as brief as possible, but with enough information to really explain the costs and what are the challenges with starting up programs and running programs. So putting some numbers to some of these issues. Anyone want to add to this? Disagree that this shouldn't be the number one priority?
Well, I guess is in the course of you doing the research, we've already seen some of the sources of income possible. Some of it has to do with maybe rewarding, make eligibility, the money's there. That's always looked upon more favorably than trying to ask for more money because the budget situation.
And I think one of our recommendations will be, to create a state tuition waiver program similar to those of for homeless populations and foster care recipients. Again, I don't know if we want to include, asking the state for funds, but that's an idea that we've also talked about in terms of supporting individual students, which would then help the colleges operate, help sustain programs if there were additional tuition coverage sources.
Well, is there a way to divide the recommendation or the funding sources like between like those that are possible and those that are a wish list, so that when we say need more money, state money, of course, it's going to be a wish list given the financial situation, but the category of possible funding sources because it's there and it needs to be shared, but it's not being shared with this particular population, or some kind of distinction there, so we don't get into if there's ever a hearing, just get shut off immediately because we're asking for money that you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for this priority area, I think Charles Adams is on the call. I can't see everybody. Charles, you're there. So I'm going to ask you for some help here. I'm not sure if Meredith is here too. So I was hoping to talk to the programs if we could get together at some point and talk about the operational costs of each of our individual programs, because it's really hard to talk about this holistically in a sense, right? We each operate differently. The cost of our programs are different because we're different institutions and we offer different services. So it's really hard to answer this question without like looking at the individual programs. So this is going to be tricky, but I'm hoping that those of us that are running the programs can maybe get together and do this institution or program by program.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all in.
And we might be able to kind of do a like prediction of what this would cost for a community college, because that cost would be different from, you know, a 4-year public and then a 4-year private. So I think we need to kind of talk about some of those differences when we, you know, gather this information. And then of course, what are the challenges? So that's number one.
Dr. Couture, I had a question actually.
Yeah.
I'm kind of on the fence with this being number one because I'm trying to figure out like what's our specific recommendation going to be to the state beyond spend more money on this, right? Which we all want. I do remember we were talking about maybe like different funding models, so will that be included? But yeah, I'm not opposed to being priority one, but I also feel like our impact might be greater if we spend more time on non-fiscal stuff and it's not priority one. Whereas again, I feel like just reading the priority one, I feel like at the end of the day, it's like, oh, y'all are reducing it by 700,000, put it back in, you know. So I'm trying to figure out like what can we say or add to the conversation.
And that's why this number two, my priority number two, maybe should be number one, because priority number two is about creating a statewide coalition or like a system approach. Where in other states, like New York, for example, they have a whole office of higher ed in prison, and they are able to attract philanthropic foundations to fund statewide initiatives rather than individual programs. So if we're thinking about the need for funding and the state is not, you know, in a position to provide additional funding to these kind of programs, then maybe priority one needs to be creating this kind of approach, like a system approach that could attract outside external funding to support these efforts, as in other states. So my priority number two, maybe we should shift it to number one. And under this priority, you know, there's research that is needed to kind of explain what is happening in other states. I think that needs to go into this annual report. Other models that, you know, other states are able to attract a lot of money because they have such a coordinated effort across all higher ed systems.
Where is that in New York? Where is that agency located? Separate from the Department of Corrections, you know?
So SUNY's Office of Higher Ed in print is under SUNY, right? So I always go back to the University System of Maryland because, I mean, it's one group, right? Just like SUNY is just overseeing the 4-year public institutions, but, USM has been, talking about doing this. Maybe they will end up doing this in the next year or two. But it needs to just be a little bit more broad because we have great private universities doing this work. And we also want to include our community colleges in this work. Danielle, you came off camera, came. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Christian. If we go with funding off the bat, it isn't going to happen. I mean, with the cuts and the deficit, and they've already taken money, I'm telling you right now, anything that comes with a fiscal impact or fiscal note, we've already been told will not get passed, will not get approved. So, I would definitely, if we want to make the most impact as we can, go with something that's not going to cause impact to the state.
And then let's reverse these. Do we agree? Maybe we don't call this one fun. Maybe we don't call it funding. Maybe we call it something else.
I loved what you brought up, and it's something I've been thinking about is again more outside sources, more funding of pilots, more things like that. And I would love if there was more research or anything, Sol, I'm sure we could find it where these philosophical philosophical, excuse me, you know what I mean, are saying, hey, if you guys had this coordinated council, you guys were more organized, we would give you money. Mm-hmm. Which is what I hear with the other priority, and that attracts me personally.
And really, if we're asking for the state to give up money for programs, that shouldn't be the ask. We could still ask for incarcerated students to have access to state funding for student aid. That does not cause a fiscal impact, right?
Totally agree.
That just opens them up to be able to apply for it. Doesn't mean they'll get it, but at least it gives them that opportunity to apply for it.
And if we had some data, right, supporting that, because I remember we had the conversation it's a political thing because the money will draw from students, right, and all of that. Sometimes that gets sticky, but I'm sure we can probably prove why that's a good idea.
Yeah.
We can prove it financially, whether we can make it a priority for this issue.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just give a quick analogy to that?
Yeah.
Years ago, when we didn't have a lot of data on whether or not education behind bars has a real impact, we were told in Annapolis and on Capitol Hill, because they were doing testifying, that we tend to think that's a great idea. We probably think it's a good idea. Even George Will came out and visited and wrote an article for the Post, which I still have, saying he thinks it's a good idea and it probably works. So everybody said, as soon as you get data to show it works, which we now have, then we can fund it. Well, then we got the data, but then they've switched from data to priorities. Public school, whatever is the priority before us. So we really have to make a strong case that it affects these other priorities of theirs.
I also wanted to quickly jump in and say that, I think those conversations about funding, what each college costs to run a program can fit within that first priority, statewide coordination, figuring out, I think having more information about what each college is doing, how much it costs to run those programs does fall under statewide coordination. So I think it's still important to have those conversations and get that information, even if it's not priority number, it doesn't exactly fall under funding. I think it still is part of statewide coordination.
Yeah, thank you. Charles?
Yeah. Yes, I know there's been talk about incarcerated students being an exempt category, like foster children, in reference to fees and tuition across the state. If we allow incarcerated students not to be charged certain fees by institutions and have that standardized across the board, I think that really is something that we should be addressing, and that might go into priority number one, is begin to standardize the cost across the board, what institutions in the way of fees can charge incarcerated students.
At least for the state system.
Yes.
you know, say,
Yeah.
okay, this is how much you can charge for an incarcerated student to per credit or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. John, go ahead.
I was just curious. Um, is there any data out there, and this would be in support of our new priority number one, is there any data out there that would look at the cost of an incarcerated citizen getting a higher education and then re-entering society versus the cost of an incarcerated citizen who does not get a higher education and then tries to re-enter society? Is, you know, as I'm listening to all this, I'm thinking it makes sense to push education as much as we can because the more we're educated, the more the better chance we have to re-enter society, re-enter the workforce. And I'm thinking that we'll be able to do it quicker at less cost to society overall compared to those who don't get educational opportunities because then they're dumped into social services, they're dumped into welfare programs, they're dumped into all kinds of stuff, ultimately which costs society as a whole, I would argue, much more money. So is there any kind of
Hmm.
studies out
Um,
there that might show something like that?
Unfortunately, not a lot. No. They're because these programs are relatively new. I mean, they started Second Chance Pell didn't start till 2016, Pell Reinstatement 2003. There just is not any reliable data on students going through, especially because of the time it takes to take and get a degree. There's just none. Now, there's of course research out there about the benefits of education while in prison, period, but not so much. There's no meta-analysis. There's no, there's some articles that, you know, of, oh, this is how our program did. But there's nothing reliable looking at an overall, no, unfortunately. That's actually part of my dissertation for my doctorate because there isn't research out there.
Yeah, just
That's
have,
too bad because it would certainly help, our case in trying to get funding out of the state right now because we could prove, we could show that if you let us educate, if you help us pay for education, it's going to cost the state less money in the long run.
Yeah, we definitely have that for education, period. And of course, we have our own data on our program since 2012 and what they show for our population. So we do have some that at least that we can show on our population.
this afternoon at 4 o'clock, I have a conversation with Lois Davis, who did that recidivism study for RAND. She wants to help us pro bono, so she and I are talking, and it's just what Danielle just said. We have the data to show that we save money in the future by less crime. But how much there is for higher education versus secondary education or career tech education has not been defined yet by the research. So, but I'll talk to her about that as part of our conversation. She's going to talk to us one night. Sometime we're going to interview her in the future. We'll have everybody talk to her and have a conversation with her.
And that's something Rand needs to look at, like, because right now the oldest one is there's one for regular education 2013, and then there's something from like 2016 and 19. But
Right.
None of those focus primarily on post-secondary programs. But Anne just asked a question about, yes, I have the recidivism, a 10-year recidivism study that I did with Goucher because it is our longest running program, which showed that we had any students who took at least 2 semesters of college with Goucher from 2012 to 2022 had a 3% recidivism rate. They didn't even have to graduate. So 3%.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have our own data, but it's just not,
The problem is we never have a control group. So some people say, well, they self-select and that's it, but so that's the problem. But I think those studies still make a big impression when you come out with stuff like that you've had 200 students and only 3% recidivated. You look at the overall recidivism rate, That's a big
Well, we
difference.
actually have it because we looked at our GED students, those who did GED and occupational, those who only did occupational, those who just did a reentry education, and we have the college. So we looked at a bunch, and we had people who came in the door with a high school diploma or didn't take anything at all while with us. Looking from, I think it was all a 10-year period. So,
It's Danielle.
So when are you going to
Sorry.
come out with this?
huh?
When are you going to come out with this?
When the Department of Labor and MLDS and the governor's office says that we can release it publicly. I will be coming out. I mean, I've written articles about it and papers about it and stuff.
No, I was just wondering how
ahead, Andrew.
recidivism was defined. Was it like return to custody?
The way we do. And that is another issue with recidivism is every state defines recidivism differently. So our definition of recidivism, unlike some states that just say like it's a touch point with, public safety, that's not it. They have to have been come back to prison on either a new charge or on this, or if they were on parole and probation, came back on a previous charge, but it had to be into state custody.
Yeah, we should use the RAND definition to be consistent because they use something similar to what Danielle is talking about. And because sometimes somebody gets rearrested, they call it recidivism. Well, heck, if you've been in prison and the police know you, you're going to get rearrested more frequently just because you're automatically suspect.
Yeah, we don't count that.
But see, that's a big issue. But why can't we say we have a research priority here too, right? With these work groups. So I think we could come up with a statement that DOL and the Department of Public Safety ought to be and coming out with this data. If we have 10-year data, they ought to be coming out with it because
I think theirs goes back to 2008, actually. Their stuff.
Well, however far back. I mean, we should make a note of that in our research priorities. I'm going to make a note anyway.
Okay. Can I move us down just to look at the other priorities? Is that okay? So we're going to swap those two priorities where statewide initiatives, number one, funding, maybe we call it something different, becomes number two. Space, I have marked as number three, technology as number four, incentives as number five, I don't have any comments for any of those. And then reentry, we'll figure out where we should put that based on what we find from the other group who's doing that work. Any thoughts of how I ranked these? Should we do something different? Totally open to changing things up.
Isn't space and technology somewhat related, and are we making that clear? Because if we have better technology, we can do a lot more, people doing things online kind of stuff, from home and all that. I mean, you should be able to approximate something like that behind bars with courses, particularly after somebody's enrolled in the program, if there's extra courses. I don't know. It just seems to me technology could help us with some of these issues very clearly.
And we are in the process, we're in talks with both Origin, who does the technology for the colleges, and also Viapath, who has the tablets on the housing units, to have Origin's software and stuff put onto the Viapath tablets so that then they can access their college stuff while on the housing units. And like the college students, we can get them like little keyboards to put with the tablets and stuff so they can actually do their work while they're on the housing units. So, but that is cost money. And those talks have just begun. So
I was going to say I like this prioritization because I think with both space and just like technology, just like Danielle was saying, it sounds like there are already kind of improvements being made. This Goucher's doing their like their trailers. So this gives us more time to focus on like things that I think we as a commission can focus on improving versus like things that are already being done and already in the works.
Well, I think, and I agree with you, Angie, I think we should highlight things that are being done, because if they're done at one place, we might be able to do them at others, and also encourage, the more use of technology, as well as, well, trailers are technology too, but IT versus, practical everyday space. But yeah, I think would be good in our report to highlight what we see as being done and say as examples of more that can be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think we highlight that, but we encourage the state to expand existing successful programs. I think I agree with you. I think that's the approach I would take.
Expand what?
Success.
Well, to the point of highlighting existing programs, framing it as, you should expand. You should consider looking at expanding these programs as successful. This is what we're seeing. Maybe that kind of approach.
Yeah, well, that's not just the state though. That's the college has to agree to that, and that's based on their enrollment numbers, how much it costs, tuition, all that kind of stuff. It's not so much us doing it, it's the college and whether or not they can afford to expand. And right now, they're just barely keeping the lights on with their programs. So we're all about expanding. They expand their numbers in every semester, well, every year, but it's a rolling basis.
Oh, understood.
It's the issue is adding new programs on is the space issue. So that's why we put them at different facilities. And they're more either if we can find space during the day to do it. If not, it's got to be in the afternoon, evenings. And that's because labor has the school the entire day. And that's where we come into space issues, is because Department of Labor has the school the entire day.
Well, they don't have, which means they don't have an evening.
Yeah, 7 to 3. Department of Labor has it. Unless we can find, like with Goucher, they bought the trailers for women so that they can do, expanded programming.
Goucher has its own private funds that it's been stored in there.
Yeah, they got a grant for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a federal earmark.
Well, let's hope that earmark stays.
Meredith?
But Meredith, I mean, hasn't Goucher historically put some of its own funds in the back of these programs in addition to what they're getting? Because I mean, obviously they can't pay with Pell Grants. For years they were doing it without Pell Grants.
Yeah, we don't get any direct funding from the college, just like in-kind donation as in like our offices. Everything else is privately funded through foundations, grants, and Pell. Yeah.
And I don't think any other colleges in Maryland have that going on, right? Maybe Georgetown.
Georgetown's probably similar.
Yeah. I'm not sure if they get funding from the college or not, but I know it's a lot of.
I mean, they also got a huge grant to start up from Mellon in the very beginning, which was really big. So they have more ability, I think, to attract big donations. Where University of Baltimore, we have our staff, it's funded, we're state employees, right? So the university decides where money goes, and we've been blessed with the university making decisions to fund staffing for this program when someone retires, right? There's a line, and we've been lucky that they give it a second chance to hire someone. So that's how we've been able to have staffing, but it's a university decision. It's hard to kind of replicate that because it's up to each institution to make decisions on that.
Be interesting to find out more about Georgetown too, and how they did. I'm happy to see my alma mater, one of my alma maters, involved with this, but I don't know anything specifically about. I mean, Judith Lichtenberg might know something.
Judy's away, right?
Yeah, she's out right. She's away right now. Yeah.
Okay. So I had to step away for a minute, but did we decide to combine space and technology or just kind of leave it in this order?
I just think there ought to be a paragraph to show there's some relationship here, because you're creating internet space, which is one of the things that we don't have much of in prisons behind bars, classes and college education behind bars, because of the supposed security issue and then the cost of it as well. But it's been so many programs rely more on face-to-face programs exclusively, and we see it moving more and more towards use of technology. And I don't want to suggest that you can replace post-secondary education with online virtual stuff and be successful. It has to be a combination of stuff. It has to be a real holistic approach, because a lot of students wouldn't be able to do that. They need the motivation, they need interpersonal stuff, but there is an interrelationship here.
Okay. And then the last one, I mean, reentry is kind of hanging on there, but the last one I have is incentives, and I ranked this last because a lot is being done or about to be done around incentives, which is highlighted here in this paragraph. So yeah, it's not a high priority at this moment based on the fact that things are going to happen with this area.
Well, Danielle has brought up, I'm not sure, she's tuned out for a second here, but the idea that they are working to get full-time college students, a much more, a bigger incentive, because you can go to college and not get any time off a sentence, because it's in addition to what you're doing. Whereas if you can be full-time college, you can earn an equivalent to many other programs. At least she could better explain it than me, but college is moving in that direction as a regular program, as a CTE program, as a GED program, where you get credit off of sentence and whatever.
Yeah, so that's great. And, we highlight it, we mention it here, we could highlight it even in more detail for this annual report. But I'm happy to see this moving ahead.
And I understand, and Danielle again could answer this better than me, that this is one of those priorities that doesn't require legislation. It might require some legislation in the long run, but there could be some policy changes here as to what programs qualify, full-time. And Danielle could explain that better, because, it'd be good if we can do a lot of things that don't require legislation, that policy and practice. Can you make college equal to going to get your GED, under what terms? And is that capable, we're capable of doing that right now with existing policy and procedure, or does that take a legislative thing? I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. But it's important, so it's a priority. Even though it's number 5, it's important.
All right, so Ainsley and Steve, what next in terms of how we should move ahead? Like I said, with the funding area, I'm happy to start talking with some of the other programs in the state to figure out how we can represent what the operational costs and tuition costs and how Pell Grants work and all of that. So I'm happy to spend some time on that with the others doing this work. also happy to talk with USM about where they're at with this system-wide piece, because they've been doing a lot of work, kind of behind the scenes to start that. Yeah, but the other ones,
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to kind of take the lead on the other two areas or the three areas.
What's the kind of timeline? I do want to help. I'm just at the
Yeah.
moment buried. But I did think perhaps some of us, or I don't mind taking a look at some of these and maybe developing some research questions or anything around that, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit like I think our next steps, I don't think as a whole work group we need to like meet and like make a research plan, but I think maybe like Dr. Stir, Dr. Cantora and I might meet and have some priority or some milestones for each month, people we can start reaching out to. So just kind of like creating a research plan for June, July, and August, maybe into September. I think that's probably our next step.
Yeah, I would like to pick up on that worksheet that we put together. Was called the work plan for commission work groups. There's a format on the second page. I got it printed out here, and it's called format for final. Well, it's format for annual report recommendations, and we've got background, description of issue, best practice, description recommend. I think we should start taking each one of these issues and laying them into that format, and start right away. And then under that, we can, those are going to require some research, more discussion, whatever, we can, we should go ahead forth and do that for each one, Does that make sense to kind of work each one of these 5 issues into this format right away? Because we're going to end up with a report like that. So why not start using it right away as we develop each issue?
I think that's great.
Yeah. And then we should try to meet each month, as we said. We have some suggested dates. Well, the committee has to work out its own dates, but so I go forward like that, and we can have, in addition to each work group meeting monthly, each chair and Ainsley and I and whoever else wants to put a little more time, we meet to put this together before the next meeting. So everybody, if they could pick off an issue that they'd really like to work on, or if they know more about, that'd be great. Instead of everybody trying to work on 5, maybe say, I know something about this and I can do better. I mean, John Griffith, you're really the technology guy, kind of, that as an example, as if you have all the time in the world, John, right?
Is that table that you just shared the second page of the work plan document, or is that? It is,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the second page. It was attached today to the invite that Ainsley sent out, so everybody can download it and then just work against that. And then we'll continue to give guidance with Andrea and Ainsley and I and whoever else on these. Just before each meeting, we'll work with you. We'll set up little meetings and go forward.
And we meet again. Do we have something on the schedule for July?
Yes, let me take a look. I believe it's July 31st, 1 to 2 p.m. So what I imagine for these meetings is like a lot of work will be, and like the research and the work will be done between meetings, and the meetings will kind of be a presentation of the research or inviting speakers to speak about best practices. So we're not trying to cram, a month's of work into an hour. So July 31st.
So what time would that be?
1 o'clock.
1 to 2 p.m.
Okay, and then we have another August 28th. They're on the calendar.
You have another, I'm sorry, go say that
There's
again.
one also August 28th. So the last Thursday of every month, they should be on your calendar.
Yeah, higher education should be the last. Well, isn't that the last Thursday? at 1. Okay,
Okay, so the meeting at the end of July will present some of this in that form that Ainsley just shared, and I will be reaching out to individual people to gather some of this information over the next few weeks. Not a lot of time. Not a lot of time. November is going to be here really soon.
yeah, that's why I want to get a jump on these things. That interim report came on us really fast. And so I'm gonna, I'll continue, and Ainsley and I will continue to keep us on schedule. So I hope everybody understands the reason why November 15th is after talking with Delegate Pasteur and the other delegates, that if we want to get something, if there's a legislative thing, we need to get it in, not January 1st. It's got to be that they got to start working on it. And so giving us time and giving them time, we picked November 15th. Because after that too, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, bingo, not too many people are able to do a lot, Okay.
Okay.
I think this is a good. I must commend all you people on this committee. I think you're doing terrific work, and we just, for those who pray that somehow Pell Grants are going to remain, and others that believe in good luck. Let's hope for good luck. But a lot of it's going to be, I don't know, people working on the Hill to try to make it happen too. I do keep on bringing this up, and it's not because I support this particular administration, but they're the ones that put Pell Grants in for the incarcerated. After fighting for years, ironically, they did. So I hope there's enough support when the Kushner family in particular to keep this thing as a priority. And they're the ones that did it. So.
Great. Let's close with that positive thought.
Okay. Very good. So Ainsley, I'd like to stick on for a minute if you can.
Yeah, I can do that.
So,
Oh.
okay, good.
So,
And
sorry, Dr. Sturgeon, but